A lot of football recruiting stuff to talk about on today's episode of the show, including the big official visit weekend of June 17th through the 19th. We will discuss some of the visitors that will be on campus throughout the month here in just a second. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Happy Memorial Day. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. For those who are not aware of who I am, I serve as a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to personally thank you, as I always do at the top of the episode, for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I alluded to, it's going to be a episode dominated by football recruiting talk. We're going to start out by discussing why the weekend of June 17th might be one of, if not the biggest recruiting weekend for the Louisville football program in its history here in just a second. We'll also talk about two visitors who will be making their official visits to the campus later on in the month of June. That is in-state defensive lineman Jamarian Harkless and three-star cornerback Vanderbilt commit Kevis Thomas. Who both of those guys will be on campus at different times at the end of the month. But we'll start out discussing the big June 17th official visit weekend and why it could ultimately end up as one of, if not the biggest recruiting weekend in program history. Look, simply put, I don't like to speak in absolutes, saying that this is the biggest or this is the most important recruiting weekend in program history, because I think that can kind of be looked at as a little bit premature. But at the end of the day, I just don't remember a weekend in my 16 years of being a Louisville football fan being this highly regarded, having this many highly touted prospects on campus. I get it, the weekend in January that saw Pierce Clarkson commit, and then over the next couple of days, it seemed like 5, 6, 7 other commits made their pledges to Louisville. I'm not saying it's going to be, large in that, in that style. And what I mean by that is not, we might not necessarily see 5, 6, 7 commits, but I do think in terms of, overall ranking per recruit, there's never been a weekend where we've seen this many highly rated guys on campus. But make no mistake about it, this weekend does not happen if the one in January doesn't happen. Credit to the staff for really getting the ball rolling in the Flyville 23 recruiting class. And also credit to the guys that are committed in this class for going out there and recruiting so hard. Pierce Clarkson being one of them. 8 of the 9 current commitments will be on campus for the June 17th official visit weekend. The only recruit that has not confirmed that he will be there is in-state defensive back Jeremiah Collins, who has been on campus multiple times before. There has been wind of a possible commitment here in the next couple days. Shout out to the guys over at Rivals. I know Pierce Clarkson and Aaron Williams, the 4 stars from California, have alluded to there being a commitment as well. If it is who the guys at Rivals are alluding to, well, then it seems like there may be more commits on campus than currently thought. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to steal their thunder, and credit to those guys, assuming that it comes true. But ultimately, like I mentioned, it's huge to not only have Pierce Clarkson on campus, the kind of the crown jewel of the class, so to speak, the guy who has really gotten this ball rolling, but also all of the other commits, basically, 8 of the 9 commits, having those guys on campus, getting to vibe with the uncommitted guys that are coming on campus, that's huge. We talk about the people that are going to be on campus that are uncommitted. We spoke on Saturday on that episode of the show. Number 1 overall running back Rueben Owens will be on campus for his official visit. That is huge. Now, regardless if the Cardinals have a solid shot to land him or not, goes without saying it's extremely critical to get these guys on visits. DeAndre Moore Jr., the top 60 overall recruit, 4-star wide receiver from Los Alamitos, California, a guy that Pierce Clarkson, Jahlil McClain, Aaron Williams, so on and so forth. Louisville has really been, high on this guy for the past couple months. He decommitted from Oklahoma in January after visiting during that weekend in January where Pierce Clarkson committed. This is huge to be able to get him on campus for an official visit. And hopefully the Cardinals will have a solid shot at landing him. Moving on down the list, another guy that Louisville fans should be very, very familiar with if you are on social media. Top 100 offensive lineman Madden Sanker from Douglasville, Georgia. 6 foot, 305-pound interior offensive lineman. It seems like it possibly could come down between a battle between his home state and defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs and the Louisville Cardinals in this one. I think the relationships that Scott Satterfield and the rest of the coaching staff are developing, but also between the recruits that are in this class, Pierce Clarkson, you have Pierce Clarkson, Aaron Williams, moving on down the list, they've really, really gone out there and formed relationships with some of these guys like DeAndre Moore Jr., like Madden Sanker. And when we heard on Saturday about the relationship that Steve Clarkson and Rueben Owens' dad are forming, it's all about relationships in the recruiting realm, obviously NIL as well. But some other guys that are going to be on campus. Another guy that hasn't been talked about a lot, edge rusher from Durham, North Carolina, Jaybron Harvey, a top 4-star guy. So I think that's going to be something that you have to look at as well. So ultimately, I'm interested to see kind of how that goes around. But at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting to kind of see that. And getting some help on the defensive line. I mean, obviously that would be a huge addition as well. One that really hasn't been talked about a lot. Javin Simpkins, 4-star running back from Miami, Florida, who we spoke about on Saturday when talking about Rueben Owens and Marquise Williams. He's been a guy that's been talked about a lot, has been on campus as well. So, excuse me. And he's another guy that has been hyping up Louisville on social media. And everything's kind of based on social media nowadays in terms of like players recruiting other players and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, this could be a big weekend for not only the top 100 players, but also, Jaybron Harvey, Javin Simpkins, high 3-star offensive lineman Luke Burgess, who Louisville is getting the last official visit to before he seemingly makes his decision between the Cardinals, North Carolina, and Florida State. And not to even mention that, but there's more players that have confirmed as well. Kyle Parker, Raymond Pulido, Jordan Church. It's going to be a big weekend for offensive line recruitment. Pulido, Jordan Church, Luke Burgess, Madden Sanker, 4 guys that have not committed yet that have possibly been rumored to join the Louisville recruiting class. Kyle Parker, low 4-star, high 3-star wide receiver from the state of Texas, who Louisville has been in on. He's been on campus multiple times. He's going to be making another visit to campus. So I think that this opportunity, this weekend presents an opportunity to, number one, be able to get these guys on visits, having them come to campus, spend time with the coaching staff, some of the recruits, other players within the program already. But it also offers the opportunity to kind of, reap the benefits of what you have sowed throughout the recruiting process so far as recruiting these guys so hard that this weekend could be an opportunity to, try to get some commitments in the work to where you continue that momentum that you have been able to create throughout, the past couple months. This is a great opportunity. Look, there are 9 commitments so far. It seems like if all things kind of go to plan, there's probably going to be 10 before for the weekend. And obviously other players could throw their names into the mix and try to, come visit on, that weekend as well. But overall, if the list remained solid right here and there was no other names added, no names decreased, this is going to be one of, if not the biggest recruiting weekends in program history. I don't think you can overlook that. And if all goes well, I mean, we're talking about, Louisville being in contention to finish with a possible top 15 class if they can get some more commitments from this respective visitor list. But overall, the month of June itself is going to be huge. And not just on June 17th. Like, I would expect this whole month to be a whole big recruiting weekend. The weekend after, which I believe is, June 24th, that weekend, you have, I'm sorry, not June 24th. It starts June 21st. There will be a visit from Jamarian Harkless, defensive lineman from Frederick Douglass, which is in Lexington, Kentucky. He's a guy who's picked up a ton of offers here recently. The 3-star defensive lineman is definitely going to rise up recruiting rankings. We will talk about what he could bring to the table here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thanks again, Louisville fans, for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. So, as I mentioned, Jamarian Harkless is going to be on campus on June 21st. I'm not sure how long his visit is going to last. I'm not sure if it's an official or not, but at the end of the day, getting him on campus is big. He made an unofficial a couple months ago. The 2023 defensive lineman recruit is currently not ranked in the 24/7 Sports Composite. He is 87 ranking on 24/7 Sports, the 5th best player in the state of Kentucky. And man, has his recruitment picked up big time in the past month or so. Excuse me. When you look at some of the programs that have offered, you're talking Auburn, Georgia, LSU, Kentucky, Mississippi, Illinois, Michigan, so on and so forth. It is an official visit for June 21st. Sorry, I couldn't confirm that. In a piece that Michael McCammon did for Cardinal Authority, which is the Louisville 24/7 sports site, he was able to speak a little bit with Harkless. Harkless said in that article, "I took a tour around the campus. I was there for about 2 hours. As soon as I got there, it was good vibes. I have a good relationship with the D-line coach, which is Mark Ivey. It was good with the D-line coach. We got off to a good start. As soon as I got there, I most definitely like Louisville." He went on to say, "They said that they believe I can do good things on the interior, from the 3 technique all the way down to the 0 technique. They like my knockback on the offensive lineman, which is very important. They like my hand placements, all the little things like that, which would do big in college and stuff like that." In terms of what Scott Satterfield told him, we talked about film and things he could see me doing at Louisville, all that kind of stuff. We talked about individual workouts that I could do to help me improve, and other little things in which he really liked. Last season, 30 overall tackles, 9 of those for a loss, to go with 2 sacks. It seems like it's all but certain that Jamarian Harkless is going to continue to rise up rankings. 6'4", 290 pounds. I think that this one kind of speaks for itself, because Louisville is continuing to try to beef up on the interior defensive line. With Jermaine Lole, it's probably only going to be a 1-year thing here at Louisville. He does have 2 years of eligibility, but probably a 1-year thing. And Louisville needs some difference makers on the interior. So I think that getting a guy like Tawfiq Thomas into the mix is going to be big for the Cardinals this upcoming season. But also Jamarian Harkless is a guy that when you watch his film, it's incredible that he's not ranked higher than he is. Being 6'4", 290, I love his pursuit into the opposing backfield. I think, he's a block shredder. He's a guy that sometimes you have to double team if you're opposing lineman in the state of Kentucky. I think he has good speed for his size. I liked that there were some plays to where he moved laterally and kind of chased opposing ball handlers out of bounds toward the line of scrimmage, and just being able to stay with them east to west. I think in terms of passing situations, he's got a lot of strength. Hand placement, being able to, shred blocks and stuff like that. It's a huge thing to look at. So ultimately, he's going to continue to rise up rankings. I definitely would not be surprised if Harkless was to rise into a low 4-star area, and there's going to be a lot of programs that are going to be after him. We spoke, Kentucky has offered him, LSU, Michigan, so on and so forth. So the big boys of college football have seemingly started to trickle in to line and trying to get involved in this recruitment. So it really, it's not so much as if he's a take for Louisville. In my opinion, it's going to be a matter of, can Louisville contend with some of the big schools in this recruitment. He has the ideal size, and the fact that Louisville sees him on the interior kind of makes this a possibility that just makes a ton of sense, because as of right now, there really isn't an interior defensive lineman in the class so far. I know that they're going after a couple guys, but ultimately right now, there's really not much help outside of the edge positions where you have like Adonijah Green on the edge. But ultimately, I think that this kind of makes sense. You get a couple of interior defensive linemen. I know that Caden McDonald is one that they had been looking at for the past couple months as well. So it looks like they're trying to, with the type of recruit that they're going after on the interior, taller guys with more weight. It looks like they're trying to do what we've seen when they played Kentucky over the past couple of years, is just try to beef up the defensive line and try to add more size, create more resistance in the middle, to where you're giving your edge rushers not necessarily breaks, but giving them some opportunities to not have to worry about double teams and stuff like that. So getting guys on the interior that can make impacts right away. Not to mention, he's an in-state kid. It's going to be interesting, however, to see, can Louisville compete with the school down the road for a prospect that is in Lexington? Well, that is yet to be seen. So, like I mentioned, it's nice that he's taking an official visit, with players only getting a handful of visits to spare. The fact that he's been on campus already, but he's still wanting to take an official visit. I think that Louisville needs to, if they obviously are interested fully and want to get him to commit to the program, I think that the best thing to do will be to ultimately put the full court press on before he makes the big jump in the rankings. Like we've seen from a couple of other Louisville recruits over the years. So I think that it's critical that the Cardinals make a good impression to try to get things, wrapped up immediately in that recruitment. But I'm not necessarily sure how that's going to go. I'm not sure what the visit time frame, if he's looking to take more before his commitment, when that commitment time frame even is. So it's really just kind of hearsay. It's neither here nor there. It's a little bit of just speculation. But nonetheless, I think that Louisville needs to jump out in front and try to position themselves in a good spot, to where if this does go down to like early signing day or late signing day, that the Cardinals are firmly in the mix and that they are right there in that respective recruitment. So, we'll continue to update Harkless's rankings as they come through. But in terms of the other official visit that is coming to campus later on this month, that is Kevis Thomas, the cornerback recruit that has committed to Vanderbilt last month, and he's looking to take some visits. Getting him on a visit is big. We'll talk about why that is here in just a second. If you are watching this on YouTube, obviously you're not going to hear the electronically implemented advertisements that you would if you were listening to this audio wise on like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, so on and so forth. So if you're listening to this on audio, we'll obviously see here in just a second. And as always, I want to continue to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. On the weekend of June 24th, the Cardinals currently have one official visitor. That is Vanderbilt commit 3-star cornerback Kevis Thomas from Valdosta, Georgia, Lowndes High School. I'm trying to think of who came from Lowndes recently that came from Louisville. I'm trying to go back and look as opposed to who that was. I'm thinking it was either, it might have been TJ Lewis or TJ Quinn. I'm trying to think of who it was. It was somebody in the Flyville 21 class, however, that came from Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia. Thomas, the 6-foot, 179-pound cornerback, committed to Vanderbilt back just under a month ago, back in May 1st. currently ranked as the 698th best recruit in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, regardless of position, the 65th best cornerback, and the 68th best player in the state of Georgia. Last season, mainly playing at cornerback, but also did some special teams work as a return man. Had 25 tackles and an interception. Excuse me. Was a all-region second-team selection. But played quarterback at Perry, Florida, at Perry Taylor County last year in Florida. So needless to say, it seems like he's making the transition over into defensive back. And when you watch his film, I think I like what I'm seeing from him. I think that, the athleticism is there, having decent size at 6 foot, but also just his ability to high point the football, has a ton of athleticism, like I mentioned, which helps with 50-50 jump balls. Does a good job of recognizing, what opposing quarterbacks are doing, does a good job of reading their eyes and kind of basing his coverage off of that. Has solid press at the line of scrimmage. I think keeps up well with opposing wide receivers, does a good job of backpedaling, and has good technique in terms of footwork. So I think that this is an instance to where Thomas could be a guy that rises up rankings a little bit, considering that he hasn't played in the secondary for long, or at least full time. Like I mentioned, played quarterback as I think as a freshman as a sophomore in high school. Has some solid offers, has a Kentucky offer, also has an offer from Purdue, obviously Vanderbilt, Arkansas, so on and so forth, Coastal Carolina, Duke, Indiana, Iowa State, Marshall. So some of the bigger name programs, West Virginia, South Florida, so on and so forth. So as I alluded to, not a ton of attention from a lot of Power 5 schools, but it seems like schools are starting to come around more and more when you see that, he received an offer from Kentucky recently, Purdue. So teams are starting to believe in what he's doing as a member of the secondary. When you look at what Louisville has in the secondary, well, most of their commitments right now are, cornerbacks and defensive backs. Aaron Williams, Jahlil McClain, Jeremiah Collins, Jayden Davis, Rayquan Adkins, Martel Hight. 6 of the 9 commitments for the University of Louisville in the Flyville 23 class are defensive backs. So you have to wonder, well, how many more defensive backs is Louisville going to take? I know that there are going to be multiple spots that need to be filled after this season in both the cornerback room and the safety room. So there should be no surprise that Scott Satterfield and company are trying to reload in the back half of the defense. So, Thomas is a player that is going to be interesting to see how that official visit goes, and if Louisville looks to push for his commitment immediately after that. The fact that Thomas is taking his official visits could go one of two ways. Either he's just looking to take the visits to maximize the recruiting exposure and stuff like that, the recruiting process, or he maybe isn't necessarily sold on his commitment to Vanderbilt. Either way, getting him on campus can't really hurt for the University of Louisville in this situation. If he's a player that they believe in down the road, that think, okay, maybe, hey, year 2, year 3, we're looking at him being a guy that plays a ton of snaps and a player that, we stick with Brian Brown and Wesley McGriff that can, develop fully and continue to get better as a defensive back. Well, that is, could be what Louisville has in store, but obviously some more defensive backs that Louisville is continuing to go after. So I think that, he's a player that, as right now in the top 700, I could see him getting into the top 600, maybe the top 500 with a solid season of work as a senior. In the state of Georgia and like Florida, Texas, California, you have some, lower rated 3 stars or middle of the pack 3 stars that are maybe a little bit better than their ranking suggests, just because there's so many good players in those recruiting hotbeds of talent. So, he's a player that, you get a 3-star from Georgia, you get a 3-star from Florida, you get a 3-star from Texas, California, so on and so forth. You have to feel good about, some of maybe, 3 stars from that area, as opposed to 4 stars in areas that aren't necessarily known for, as good a football. So, but that's just kind of the trends that people talk about. But as I mentioned, a huge month in terms of football recruiting. I would probably venture out and bet that we have yet to see the last of guys committing to official visits in the month of June. So we'll continue to update that list whenever we hear some more information. But that's basically going to wrap up this the first special episode on this Memorial Day. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen today. Make your second listen, the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Lee Thulin give fans an in-depth look into the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and, of course, big boards. Follow Locked On NBA Big Board every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks go out to all of the veterans that are both with us and, unfortunately, not with us for their service. Thank you for those that have, throughout the history of this country, risked their lives to, put the safety of others first and sacrificed a ton of things. We salute you today. We remember those that aren't with us, and we recognize their sacrifice and thank them for their service, and we thank their families as well, and our thoughts go out to their families. So a happy Memorial Day. As I mentioned, that's going to wrap up this first episode on this Memorial Day episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here very, very soon.